Maya Thompson walked out of her school, excited to get home. It had been a long day, and she was looking forward to relaxing. She had just finished her math test and felt good about it. Her mother, Angela Thompson, had been really busy lately since she had recently become the city's new mayor. But tonight, Maya knew they would have dinner together, just like always. As she walked down the street, she noticed how quiet everything was. Most students had already taken the bus, but Maya liked walking. It gave her time to think. She had her headphones in, listening to her favorite songs, when she noticed a police car parked on the side of the road. She didn't think much of it and kept walking. Then, a deep voice called out, "Hey, you! Stop right there!" Maya turned, confused. A tall police officer, dressed in his uniform, was walking toward her. He looked serious, his eyebrows pulled together in a frown. Maya quickly took out her headphones. "Me?" she asked, pointing to herself. "Yeah, you," the officer said. "What are you doing here?" Maya was even more confused now. "I'm just walking home," she said. The officer crossed his arms. "I've been watching you. You've been standing around here for too long. What are you up to?" Maya felt a strange nervousness in her chest. "I wasn't standing around," she said. "I just came from school. My house is a few blocks away." The officer didn't seem to believe her. "Do you have ID?" Maya quickly reached into her backpack and pulled out her school ID. "See," she said, holding it up. "I'm a student at Eastwood High. I just got out of school." The officer barely glanced at it before shaking his head. "I don't care about that. You look suspicious." Maya's heart started beating faster. "Suspicious? I didn't do anything," she said, her voice a mix of fear and frustration. "Don't argue with me," the officer said, stepping closer. "Turn around." Maya's breath caught in her throat. Turn around? But why? Before she could say anything else, the officer grabbed her arm and pulled it behind her back. "You're coming with me," he said. Maya felt panic rise inside her. "Wait, you can't just arrest me. I didn't do anything." People on the street had started to slow down, watching what was happening. A few of them pulled out their phones, recording the scene. "Stop resisting," the officer said, tightening his grip. "I'm not resisting," Maya cried, her voice shaking. Tears stung her eyes as she felt cold metal cuffs snap around her wrists. She couldn't believe this was happening. She was just a regular high school student. She hadn't done anything wrong. Why was she being treated like this? As the officer led her to the police car, she felt every eye on her. She had never felt so small, so powerless. And she had no idea that the most powerful person in the city, her mother, was about to find her. Angela Thompson had just finished a busy day at her office, where she worked on important city matters. As the newly elected mayor, there was so much to do. Meetings, discussions with other officials, planning for the future of the city, and addressing concerns from the community. It wasn't easy, but Angela was proud of the work she had done and the path she had paved as the first Black woman to hold the office. She had worked hard for this moment, and she was determined to make a difference. That evening, she was sitting at her desk, going over some documents when her phone buzzed. She looked down, thinking it was just another update about city policies or a news alert. But when she saw the name of the caller, her heart skipped a beat. It was Maya, her daughter. Angela quickly answered the phone. "Hey, sweetheart, how's your day going?" she asked, trying to sound calm even though she was still thinking about the work on her desk. But when Maya spoke, Angela immediately sensed something was wrong. "Mom, I need you to come to the police station," Maya said, her voice trembling. Angela's heart dropped. "What happened? Are you okay?" she asked, standing up from her chair, already feeling the panic rising. Maya's voice was small, almost whispering. I was walking home from school, and this officer stopped me. He accused me of something I didn't do. He arrested me, Mom." Angela could hardly believe what she was hearing. "Arrested you? Maya, you haven't done anything wrong. Why would he arrest you?" I don't know, Mom. He just kept saying I was suspicious and wouldn't listen when I told him I was going home from school. I'm really scared, Maya said. Angela's mind was racing. Her daughter was only 15. The thought of her being taken away in handcuffs, treated like a criminal, it was impossible to accept. Maya was a good kid, doing well in school, always respectful. Why would anyone think she was a threat? I'm coming, Maya. Stay calm. I'll be there as soon as I can, Angela said, her voice strong even though she was shaking inside. She immediately grabbed her jacket and rushed out of her office, calling her assistant on the way. She drove quickly through the city streets, her mind spinning. Maya was her only child, and the thought of her in danger was overwhelming. She had always worked to build a city where everyone could feel safe, where people of all backgrounds were treated with respect. But now, one of her own was a victim of the very injustice she fought against every day. As Angela drove, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a news alert about the incident. A video had already started to circulate on social media, showing Maya being arrested by a police officer. The footage had gone viral quickly, and Angela could see the headlines now. Teen arrested for walking home from school. Is this what justice looks like? Her hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. The entire city was going to see this, and they would want answers. As the new mayor, Angela had the power to make things right, but it wouldn't be easy. By the time she reached the police station, her heart was racing. She didn't know exactly what had happened, but she would make sure her daughter was safe. She was determined to protect Maya, no matter what. As she entered the building, she saw the officers talking quietly, avoiding her gaze. Angela's anger was building, but she kept her voice steady as she demanded to see her daughter. She wouldn't let anyone dismiss what had happened. Maya deserved justice, and Angela was ready to fight. Angela walked quickly down the hall of the police station, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest with each step. When she reached the holding area, she was stopped by an officer who seemed nervous to see her. "Mayor Thompson, we've been expecting you," he said, his voice a little shaky. Angela nodded but didn't say anything. Her mind was focused entirely on one thing: getting her daughter out of there. She followed the officer into a small room where Maya sat on a bench, her hands still in cuffs, looking small and frightened. The moment Maya saw her mother, her face lit up with relief. "Mom," she cried, standing up quickly. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know what to do. They wouldn't listen to me." Angela quickly moved toward her daughter and wrapped her arms around her. She could feel Maya's body trembling, but she tried to keep her voice calm and soothing. "Shh, you're okay. You're safe now. I'm here." Maya's eyes were red from holding back tears. "I didn't do anything wrong, Mom. I was just walking home. Why would he arrest me? I didn't even do anything suspicious." Angela felt a wave of anger rise inside her, but she pushed it down. She needed to stay focused. "I know, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong. You've done nothing but walk home from school, and that's not a crime." The officer who had been standing nearby cleared his throat. "The arrest was routine, Mayor Thompson. We were following standard protocol." Angela turned to face him, her voice firm. "Routine? My daughter was just walking home, and you treated her like a criminal. That's not routine. She's a good student, and she did nothing wrong." The officer shifted uncomfortably. "We understand your concern, but we have to follow procedures." Angela shook her head. "Procedures? What about listening to her? What about treating her with respect?" She glanced back at Maya, who was now wiping away tears. "She's not a criminal, and you've put her through something she didn't deserve." Maya looked up at her mother, her voice shaky. "What happens now, Mom? Do I get to go home? What will people say? Everyone's going to see the video, aren't they?" Angela sat down beside her daughter and held her hand. "Yes, the video's already out there, but that doesn't change the truth. You're not to blame for any of this. This isn't your fault." At that moment, The police chief entered the room. He looked uncomfortable, almost as if he knew what was coming. Angela stood up to face him, her expression serious. "I want to know exactly why my daughter was arrested. She deserves answers, and I demand them." The chief hesitated for a moment before speaking. "We're looking into the situation, Mayor Thompson. We're going to review everything." "Review everything," Angela repeated. "No, I need answers now. Why wasn't she treated like a person? Why wasn't she just allowed to walk home like any other student?" The chief was quiet for a moment, clearly uncomfortable. Angela could see the pressure building on him. She could feel her anger growing, but she kept her voice steady. "I'll be getting legal counsel," she said firmly. "And this won't be swept under the rug. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what happened here. My daughter deserves respect, and she's going to get it." Maya looked at her mother with wide eyes, grateful for her strength. Angela gave her a reassuring smile. "We're going to fix this, Maya. I promise." The police chief nodded but didn't say anything more. Angela led her daughter out of the room, her mind already planning the next steps. This wasn't just about what had happened to Maya. It was about making sure no one else had to go through the same thing. As they walked out of the station together, Angela held Maya's hand tightly, knowing this was just the beginning of a much bigger fight. As Angela and Maya left the police station, the weight of the situation hung heavy in the air. Angela's mind was racing, trying to figure out what to do next. She knew this wasn't just about one wrongful arrest. It was about a larger issue, about the way people like her daughter were treated every day. But before she could make her next move, the phone in her pocket buzzed again. This time, it was a news alert. The headline read, "Teen arrested for walking home from school. Video sparks outrage." Angela's stomach sank. She knew the video of Maya's arrest had already started making the rounds on social media, but seeing it in the news made everything feel more real. Maya's face, caught in fear and confusion, was now being shared across the city and beyond. Angela could already imagine the hurt and anger it would stir up. "This isn't just about us anymore," Angela said, her voice soft but serious. "People are going to see what happened to you, Maya. They'll see how you were treated, and I'm going to make sure they know that this kind of thing has to stop." Maya nodded, but Angela could see that her daughter was still shaken by the experience. "I don't know if I'm ready for everyone to know," Maya said, her voice uncertain. "What if people judge me? What if they think I did something wrong?" Angela squeezed Maya's hand gently. "Sweetheart, you didn't do anything wrong. You were just trying to get home. This isn't about you. It's about the way you were treated. And people need to see that. You're not alone in this." When they got home, the house was quiet. The evening light was soft through the windows, but inside, there was a storm of emotions swirling. Angela's first thought was to call a press conference. She needed to speak to the people, her people, and let them know what had happened. But before doing that, she needed to make sure Maya was okay. Maya went straight to her room, still visibly upset. Angela followed her, sitting beside her on the bed. "Maya, I know today was a lot. I want you to take some time to rest. You've been through something no one should ever have to experience. Just know that I'm here, and I'll always protect you." Maya nodded but didn't say much. Angela knew she couldn't rush her daughter through this process. Maya would need time to heal, and Angela would make sure she had it. But Angela also knew she couldn't wait too long. She had a responsibility now, not just as a mother, but as the mayor of the city. If she wanted things to change, if she wanted justice for Maya and everyone else who had faced similar treatment, she needed to act quickly. The next morning, the news was everywhere. The video of Maya's arrest had gone viral, and social media was flooded with reactions. Some people were outraged, expressing anger over the way the police had treated a young girl simply walking home. Others were questioning the officer's behavior, calling for a change in how police officers handled situations like this. But there were also voices that tried to defend the officer, saying he was just doing his job. Angela knew that the city was divided on this issue. But the truth was clear to her. What had happened to Maya wasn't just wrong. It was part of a larger problem that had been ignored for too long. Angela wasn't going to let this be brushed aside. She wasn't going to let Maya's pain be forgotten. As she stood in front of the mirror that morning, getting ready for the press conference, Angela took a deep breath. She had to be strong, not just for Maya, but for everyone who had been treated unfairly. She looked at herself and reminded herself of the promises she had made when she took office. It was time to keep those promises, no matter how difficult the road ahead might be. When the press conference finally began, cameras clicked and lights flashed. Angela stood tall, calm, and composed as she addressed the crowd. "What happened to my daughter yesterday is not an isolated incident," she began, her voice firm. "It's a reality many people face every day. People of color, people who are just trying to live their lives. This needs to change." Her words resonated with the audience. They could feel the passion behind them, the strength of a mother who would fight for her daughter, and for what was right. The road ahead would be difficult, but Angela was ready. She wasn't just speaking for Maya anymore. She was speaking for every person who had ever been mistreated or unfairly judged, and she wasn't going to stop until things changed. After Angela's powerful speech at the press conference, the city seemed to split in two. On one side, many people rallied behind her, praising her for standing up for her daughter and speaking out about the injustice that had occurred. On the other side, there were those who defended the police officer, claiming that he was just doing his job and following protocol. It was clear that this issue had struck a deep chord in the community, but Angela knew that the most important thing was that people were talking about it. The conversation had started, and it needed to continue. In the days that followed, the pressure on the police department only grew. The video of Maya's arrest continued to circulate, and more people came forward with their own stories of being unfairly treated by the police. Some of these stories were old, but many were recent. It became apparent that what happened to Maya was not an isolated incident. It was part of a larger problem that had been ignored for far too long. Angela met with her team and set to work. She had promised Maya that she would make sure this never happened again, and she wasn't going to back down. It wasn't enough to just speak out. She needed to act. She started by calling for a full investigation into Officer Daly's actions. As the mayor, Angela had the power to demand accountability, and she wasn't going to let anyone off the hook. The investigation uncovered disturbing details about Officer Daly's past. There were multiple complaints about his behavior, accusations of racial profiling, inappropriate treatment of citizens, and a history of disregarding proper procedure. These complaints had been filed over the years, but they had all been quietly ignored or dismissed. It turned out that Daly's actions weren't just an accident. They were part of a pattern that had been allowed to continue for far too long. Angela couldn't believe what she was reading. How had this officer been allowed to stay on the force for so long, despite so many complaints? She felt a deep sense of betrayal, not just for Maya, but for everyone who had been affected by Daly's actions. This was more than just one bad officer. It was a failure of the system itself. Despite the mounting evidence against him, Officer Daly's union was standing firm in his defense. They argued that his actions were justified and that he was just doing his job. They claimed that the public's outrage was misplaced and that the officer should not be punished for following procedure. But Angela knew that this wasn't just about one officer. It was about sending a message to the entire city that injustice would not be tolerated, no matter who it came from. The tension between the city officials and the police union grew as the investigation continued. The union, powerful and influential, pushed back against any attempts to hold Daly accountable. They accused Angela of using her position as mayor to target one of their own, arguing that her actions were politically motivated. But Angela didn't back down. She knew that the truth was on her side, and she wasn't afraid to fight for what was right. The more she learned about the police department's history, the more determined she became. She couldn't let this situation slide. Maya deserved justice, and so did every other person who had been mistreated by the police. Angela knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but she was ready. She would continue to speak out, continue to demand change, and continue to fight for the people of her city. As the investigation into Daly's past actions unfolded, more and more people began to pay attention. The public was starting to realize just how deep the problem went, and they were beginning to demand action. Angela knew that this was just the beginning of a larger movement, a movement that could change the way police interacted with the community, one that could make the city safer and fairer for everyone. And as for Maya, while she was still struggling with the trauma of what had happened, she started to find strength in her mother's determination. She knew that this fight wasn't just for her. It was for everyone who had ever been treated unfairly. And with her mother by her side, she felt a little less afraid of what was to come. As the investigation into Officer Daly's actions continued, the city's attention remained firmly on the issue of police accountability. Angela had known that the journey would be challenging, but as the days went on, she could see that the public was beginning to understand the severity of the problem. Protests began to take shape across the city, with citizens gathering to demand change. They carried signs that read, "Justice for Maya," and "End police brutality." It was clear that people were no longer willing to stay silent. Angela couldn't help but feel a sense of pride watching the community come together. It was a difficult time, but it was also a time of awakening. She knew that change was never easy, but the voices of the people had the power to move mountains. The unity that was forming around this cause gave her hope. Maya, on the other hand, was still processing everything that had happened. She wasn't used to being in the spotlight, and the constant attention, both from the media and the public, was overwhelming. At first, she wanted to hide away, to go back to the way things were before the arrest. But as the days went by, and she saw the support pouring in from all over the city, she started to feel differently. One afternoon, as Maya sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone, she looked up at her mother. Angela was making some calls, her voice calm and focused, but Maya could tell she was still carrying the weight of everything happening around them. "Mom," Maya said, her voice hesitant, "do you think this is really going to change things? I mean, it feels like everything's just getting bigger and bigger." Angela paused for a moment, setting down the phone. She walked over to Maya, sitting beside her. "It's going to be hard, sweetheart," she said gently. "But this isn't just about what happened to you. It's about changing things for everyone. We can't let things stay the way they are, no matter how hard it gets. Your voice, our voices, matter." Maya nodded slowly. She didn't know if she was ready to be the face of a movement, but she realized that the fight wasn't about her. It was about something much bigger. It was about making sure that no one else would have to go through the same thing she did. Over the next few weeks, Angela worked tirelessly. She held meetings with community leaders, police officers, and local activists to discuss ways to improve the relationship between the police and the people they were meant to serve. She pushed for changes in police training, advocating for de-escalation techniques and greater cultural sensitivity. Angela also called for an independent review of the police department's practices, demanding that officers be held accountable for their actions. But the road wasn't always smooth. The police union continued to fight back, insisting that changes weren't necessary and that officers were simply doing their jobs. They argued that a few bad apples shouldn't define the entire department, but Angela refused to back down. The truth was clear. Too many people had been hurt by the system. It wasn't just about a few bad officers. It was about the culture that allowed those officers to get away with their actions for so long. One evening, as Angela prepared for yet another meeting, Maya approached her with a question. "Mom, do you ever get tired? I mean, it feels like there's always something we're fighting against." Angela looked at her daughter, feeling the weight of her words. She had been pushing herself harder than ever before. But Maya was right. It was exhausting. The pressure was immense, and the stakes were high. But Angela had come this far, and she couldn't stop now. I do get tired, Maya, Angela admitted, her voice softening. But sometimes we have to fight because the cause is worth it. I'm doing this for you. I'm doing this for every person who has ever felt afraid or treated unfairly. Maya smiled, a small but genuine smile. I know, Mom, and I'm starting to understand why this fight matters too. It was a quiet moment, but it meant everything to Angela. She had always known she was raising a smart, strong young woman, but hearing Maya say that she understood the importance of the fight for justice made Angela's heart swell with pride. As the weeks went by, the pressure on Officer Daly continued to mount. More people began to speak out against him, sharing their own experiences with the officer and demanding justice for all. It became clear that the support for Maya and her family wasn't just about one arrest. It was about a larger movement for equality and fairness in the city. Angela knew they were on the right path, but she also knew that the real work was just beginning. The tension in the city was palpable. As the investigation into Officer Daly continued and more people came forward with their stories, Angela knew that the pressure on the police department was reaching its breaking point. The protests had grown larger, and the community was demanding action. It was clear that people were no longer willing to accept the status quo. They wanted change, and they wanted it now. Angela's schedule had become more packed than ever. She spent long hours in meetings with community leaders, activists, and law enforcement officials. Every day, she was trying to find a way to bring about real change, to ensure that the mistakes of the past wouldn't continue to haunt the city. She also knew that she had to strike a balance. While the public was calling for justice, she had to make sure that the solutions were fair and lasting. Maya, too, was feeling the weight of everything happening around them. The attention from the media, the constant questions from reporters, and the growing number of people who wanted to speak to her made Maya feel like her life had turned upside down. She often found herself retreating to her room, needing space to think and process. But despite the chaos, she started to feel a sense of pride in her mother's work. Watching Angela fight for justice gave her strength, and she began to realize that her voice mattered too. Slowly, Maya started speaking out more, sharing her experience and helping others who had been affected by similar situations. It wasn't easy, but it felt like a small step toward healing. One afternoon, as Angela sat in her office, reviewing reports and preparing for yet another meeting, she received a call from the police chief. It was the kind of call she had been waiting for, an update on the investigation into Officer Daly. Angela listened intently as the chief explained that they had gathered enough evidence to move forward with charges. Officer Daly had violated department policies on multiple occasions, and now there was enough to hold him accountable. Angela's heart raced as the chief spoke. This was a major step forward, but it wasn't over yet. She knew that Daly's union would fight back, and she had no illusions about how difficult the road ahead would be. But for the first time since Maya's arrest, Angela felt a glimmer of hope. They were finally making progress. Later that evening, Angela gathered with her team to discuss the next steps. Everyone knew that this was a critical moment. If they were going to bring about real change, they had to keep pushing forward. Angela was determined to hold the police department accountable, but she also knew that the city needed to heal. She needed to ensure that this wasn't just a victory for her family, but for everyone who had been affected by systemic issues within the police force. As Angela made plans to address the city in a public statement, she couldn't help but think about Maya. The journey they had been on together had been challenging, but it had also brought them closer. Angela's daughter had become a symbol of hope for many, and Angela knew that no matter what happened next, Maya's strength and courage would continue to inspire others. The next day, Angela stood in front of a crowd of reporters, ready to make a public statement. The weight of the moment was heavy, but she stood tall. The events of the past few weeks have been difficult for all of us, Angela began, her voice strong. But they have also brought to light the deep issues that have plagued our police force for far too long. This is not just about one officer's actions. It's about a system that has allowed these actions to go unchecked. Today, we take the first step toward justice, toward accountability, and toward healing. The crowd was silent as Angela spoke, the weight of her words settling in. "This is only the beginning," she continued. "I will continue to work with our community to make sure that we are not only addressing the issues of the past, but building a future where every citizen feels safe and respected." Angela's words were met with applause from the crowd, but she knew that the work was far from over. The battle for justice and equality was just beginning, and she would not rest until the city had the police force it deserved, one that protected and served with respect, fairness, and understanding. As Angela returned to her office, she took a deep breath, reflecting on everything that had led to this moment. There was still much to be done, but she was proud of how far they had come. More than that, she was proud of her daughter, who had found her own voice in the midst of everything. Together, they had proven that change was possible, even when it seemed impossible. And with every step they took, they were making the world a little bit better, a little bit safer, for everyone. Months had passed since the investigation into Officer Daly began, and the city had gone through a transformation. The protests had slowed, but the conversations they started continued to echo through the streets. People were more aware, more connected to each other, and more willing to speak up when they saw injustice. Angela felt that change, even in the smallest ways. She could see it in the way people looked at her daughter, Maya, not as a victim, but as a symbol of strength and courage. Maya had grown too. She wasn't the quiet, reserved girl she had been when the arrest first happened. Now she spoke openly about her experience, about the fear and confusion she felt on that day, but also about the hope she found in her mother's fight for justice. Maya had become an advocate, working alongside community groups to help others who had faced similar challenges. She was no longer afraid to stand in front of a crowd and share her story. She understood now that her voice could bring about change, not just for her, but for everyone. Angela had kept her promise to Maya. The investigation into Officer Daly had led to real consequences. After weeks of deliberation, Daly was fired from the police force. While it was a victory, Angela knew it wasn't enough. One officer's dismissal didn't fix everything. The system needed to change, and that would take time. But it was a start. In the wake of Daly's firing, Angela pushed for sweeping reforms within the police department. She advocated for improved training, better community relations, and a more transparent system of accountability. Slowly, the changes began to take shape. The city's police force started to look more like the community it served, with more officers of diverse backgrounds. New policies were put in place to ensure that officers were held accountable for their actions. There were still challenges ahead, but the progress was undeniable. Angela knew that real change didn't come without sacrifice, but she was willing to make those sacrifices. Her career had become more challenging, with criticism from both sides of the argument. Some people praised her for her boldness, for tackling tough issues head-on. Others criticized her, claiming that she was dividing the city. But Angela didn't care about the criticism. She cared about her daughter. She cared about the people of the city who deserved better. And she cared about making sure that no one else would ever have to experience the fear and humiliation that Maya had faced. As the city began to heal, Angela found herself reflecting on everything that had happened. She thought about the day Maya had been arrested, about the anger and confusion they had both felt. But now, looking at everything they had accomplished, she saw it as a turning point. That moment had brought about a movement, and that movement was changing lives. Angela had found a new sense of purpose. Her role as mayor was no longer just about politics. It was about making a real difference in the lives of the people she served. One evening, as she sat at the kitchen table with Maya, they talked about the future. Maya was starting high school, and Angela could see the bright future ahead of her. There was so much they both had to look forward to. But there was also so much more work to do. Angela knew that she couldn't stop now. "Mom," Maya said, looking up from her homework, "do you think we've changed things for good? I mean, it feels like we've made a difference, but will it really last?" Angela smiled at her daughter, proud of the young woman she had become. We've made a start, Maya, and I think we've shown people that change is possible. But the real challenge is making sure it sticks. Change doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen by just talking about it. We've got to keep pushing, keep working together. And as long as we do that, we'll make sure that things keep getting better. Maya nodded thoughtfully. I know we will, Mom. As they sat there, Angela felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The road ahead was still long, but they had already come so far. Together, they had made a difference, and with each step, they would continue to fight for justice, fairness, and equality. The city had changed, and so had they. The journey was far from over, but Angela knew one thing for sure. They were on the right path, and they weren't turning back.